Welcome to Underdog Rising with your host, Wade Posehn, where we ignite your journey from humble beginnings to greatness through inspiring tales of top executives and entrepreneurs. Welcome, everybody, to Underdog Rising. Today, we have Tami Nealy, VP of Communications at International Sports Sciences Association. Tami, thank you for being with us today, and we're excited to hear about your journey.
Thanks for having me, Wade.
Please, can you share your underdog story and just walk through your journey from after college to where you are today so that the listeners can better understand your journey?
Yeah, so I graduated college in the 1900s, 1999 to be specific, and grew up in Michigan, went to college in Michigan, and really knew that I wanted to work in sports after graduation. And I applied to every professional Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL, NBA, like every professional sports franchise, and was just turned down left and right. Because that wasn't a time when you would send your resume by mail and they would send you a letter by mail saying no thank you. And so I joked that I could like wallpaper a bedroom with all the rejection letters that I got, but I didn't take my foot off the gas and pursued and had an opportunity the week before graduation to interview with the WNBA franchise at the time that was in Salt Lake City. And they flew me out there, offered me the job, and I said, absolutely, I will take it. I had already committed to a job in Charlotte, North Carolina. All my things were on a moving truck going to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was like, I'll figure that out later because I've got like a suitcase full of clothes to have lasted me while I was finishing college. So I moved to Salt Lake, figured out how to get my things from North Carolina to Utah, a little bit of a switch up for the movers. But yeah, didn't give up, started my career in the WNBA, 2 years in Salt Lake City, then the opportunity to work for the Phoenix team, the WNBA team in Phoenix. So relocated to Phoenix, worked for that team for 4 years. The owner of that team also owned the arena football team. So in the off season, they're like, do you want to do PR for the arena football league team too? And the answer is always yes, and I'll figure it out later. So I did WNBA and arena football. Fast forward December of 2004, I had my son. He's 19 now and had never stopped to think, how am I going to travel with a team? How am I going to do all of this when I have an infant? Opportunity came up to go work in city government, which I don't recommend any postpartum woman make a career move like 3 weeks postpartum. I was like, oh, I never thought about how I was going to travel with a sports team and have a newborn, and the opportunity to be really grounded and present with a city government job, still doing PR. So I did that. And in 9 months of doing that, I was able to get 34 stories placed in local news about the library. So I was really effective at it, but it wasn't bringing me any sort of joy. The library is great. I'm a very avid reader and I love that, but that wasn't where my drive was. Had an opportunity come up from the NBC sports anchor, reached out to me and said, hey, I know you've got a passion for NASCAR. There's an opening at the Phoenix Raceway for a director of communications. I told the track president about you. He's going to call you. I'm like, wait, what? So then I found myself working for a NASCAR track for 2 years. After 2 years doing that, I realized I need what I call a big girl job. I don't need to be doing PR and selling tickets to events. I need to do something where I feel like I'm making an impact and making a difference. So there was an opportunity presented to join the company LifeLock, which is an identity theft protection company. I was employee number 30 there, was there 7 years, ended up helping take the company public. I was with the company, I joined in May. And in August, the CEO said to me, hey, we have an opportunity to sponsor a NASCAR race, title sponsor. I'd love for you to execute it. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, when's the race? And he's like, in 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, I executed title sponsorship of a NASCAR race. So I couldn't really escape sports. Then LifeLock became the first ever jersey sponsor of a pro sports team in the US. They sponsored the Phoenix Mercury's jersey. So was still involved in sports, even though it wasn't something that I was making it an effort to do. These opportunities came to the company and they kind of put me on point for doing that, in addition to all of the other PR and communications activities that I was doing. And then was there for 7 years, transitioned into working in financial technology companies, education technology companies, influencer marketing companies. I love the startup space and having the impact that I can have there, wearing 15 to 20 different hats on any given day. And then fast forward to August of 2023 and had the opportunity to join a former LifeLock colleague here at the International Sports Sciences Association, a more established company, much larger company, but in 35 years, they didn't have a communications division. So while it's an established company, it feels startup in the sense that I'm helping to build a communications division that didn't exist before. So that was a much longer answer than you probably anticipated, but that's the path of my career.
And I really appreciate you going into that depth, right? Because so often folks will look at elements such as LinkedIn and then they see the high level story, right? What people want to show. So I appreciate you kind of going into the like almost back to the beginning, which is it helps influence that underdog story that you had and really brings that across nicely. So I appreciate that. I wanted to um, sort of, you mentioned within that process, impact. How important do you think it is today for folks to align themselves with a job or a role where they feel that they can make an impact in society?
I think it's really dependent on the person. I'm a high achiever. I'm driven. I like to ensure that I understand the why behind what we're doing. Like, it's not just for the bottom line. What's the bigger cause? How does this help society or whatever? That's important to me. And that is my passion. There are people who might just be looking for a 9 to 5 and it's like, oh, I can do that role. I'm going to do that. But I do it with passion and zest and it fills my cup. One thing I forgot to mention, in addition to working for the International Sports Sciences Association, I'm also an adjunct professor at Grand Canyon University. I teach in the fall and I teach a sports and entertainment marketing class. It was not offered when I was in college in the 1900s, but the opportunity to share my experiences and stories with these students who are pursuing a degree in sports and entertainment business and helping make introductions to contacts that I still have and creating opportunities for them. That's the important thing to me too about giving back and helping other people have an impact.
That is a really wonderful way for you to give back to those who might not have had what you went through, right? And then you can give them those experiences. With you being in, public relations and communications, what were the key factors that influenced your decision to pursue a career in public relations and communications?
I have this in my bio because it's funny, but it's also very true. When I was younger, my mom used to say, I hope one day you can find a job where you're paid to talk because I just talk, 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 talk. But what I've learned is that I like to tell other people's stories. So, in the role of PR and communications, it isn't Tami's story. It's how can I find a company, an organization, something that I believe in and I'm passionate about? How can I find the different stories in there and help tell them in a way that's disruptive and catches other people's attention? A lot of people say they're storytellers. You have to find the stories first. So I stole from my friend Evie. I like to be a story finder in preparation to be a storyteller.
That's such a unique take on it because you are correct. Like you do need that versatility and that key differentiator when you're trying to have a brand stand out, amongst 1,000 other brands. So that's really cool that you go out and hunt and find that story and then you create it and spin it into what it should be like in that key messaging. So in the beginning, you mentioned that you moved to different states throughout your career, which actually helped you own your independence and grow your confidence as a young adult. Like, could you share like how those experiences have shaped and influenced you within your personal approach to things in life?
I just did it. I didn't think that I didn't stop and think, oh, is this a scary thing? I said, this is where the opportunity is. So this is where I went. And now that I look back and reflect on it, I'm like, where did that bravery come from? Because that didn't exist in my family. I didn't see that by aunts, uncles, parents of just saying, oh, I'm packing up and I'm moving across the country for a job. So I don't know where that bravery came from. But moving somewhere at 22 years old where I don't know anybody and was just thrown into a new community, a new culture, a new role. I don't know how I did it. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I took that risk. And now that I have a 19-year-old son who's entering his junior year of college, I'm like, oh, is he going to do that one day? I mean, he's got the DNA for it, right? But I think doing that without pausing to think about it and overthink it, because as I've grown, I've become much more of an overthinker. I'm glad I did it without overthinking at that point because I don't know that I would be that brave today to just pack up and say, okay, here I am, I'm going. I feel a bit more established now in my home with my family, the friend group that I have and things like that. So I'm very glad I did it. I don't think I have a roadmap. I can't say here's how I did it. I'm not even sure how I did it.
But I think that that's even key, right? Sometimes we don't have to know everything that we're trying to do. Sometimes we need to take those opportunities that come our way because it's probably going to help influence the path that we will ultimately go down, right? And I think that when you touch on that element of you just had the bravery to do it, do you think that speed is important to some degree within adapting to certain career elements that might come across your plate?
When you're younger, yes, I think.
I'd say so too.
Yes, for me, I think when you're younger, yeah, just make the decision, go. Say yes, figure it out later. When you're a bit more established and there's more on the line, I think you do tend to give it a bit more pause and weigh out the pros and cons of it. When you're younger, there's not a lot of cons. You know what I mean? Just believe in yourself, make the decision, go there, get it done.
How important do you think belief is within yourself when you're younger and you're stepping out into the corporate career world?
I think it's so important. And the belief in yourself can't be, oh, I got A's in these classes in school. The belief in yourself has to say, I know I'm scrappy, I'm a hustler. I know that I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to work hard. I'm not afraid to show up early, stay late. That's what's important. What I tell students who are entering the workforce, these are skills that you need to carry with you and that will set you apart and define the rest of your career path.
And along that same vein, do you think that there are any other key elements that young professionals should focus on besides that hard work, dedication, going above and beyond? Is there any others that they would potentially benefit from hearing?
I tell young people all the time, it's never too early to build your network. You don't know when that relationship or what could come from that. Anytime you meet someone, connect with them on LinkedIn. I mean, it's shoot your shot. They might not accept it, but just send the invitation on LinkedIn to connect. Anytime I have guest speakers in my class, students who've known me before, they know that I'm going to be bringing in the week before the guest speaker, I'm going to bring in blank thank you notes and envelopes. I'm going to hand them out. The week after the speaker, you're going to turn into me a handwritten thank you note, not like, thanks, Wade, for coming and speaking to our class, but hey, Wade, it was really interesting when you said X. I'm really excited in my career to do Y, that you did. But a thoughtful handwritten thank you note. And then I package it all up and I send it to the speaker. And so what I'm trying to teach these students is anyone can send a follow-up email, but when you take the time to write that handwritten thank you note, it goes so far because no one does it anymore. But building your network and actually writing a meaningful thank you note and putting it in the mail, yeah, it might take 3 extra days to get to somebody, but it's more impactful than an email because we all get hundreds of emails each day and it's so easily to forget. But, I have a stack of thank you notes on my desk from things that, people have mailed to me.
That's so wonderful because it teaches them from such a young age that you need to stand out from the crowd, right? You need to have those key differentiators, but also put in that extra effort. Anybody can send an email or a LinkedIn connection, but show that that person really brought value to your life and that you're going to, leverage some of what they taught you. So I think that's very exceptional. And you touch on building a network. And in this day and age, when so many folks are working remote or kind of disconnected in a sense, are there any strategies or techniques that these young professionals can implement that can help them build a network?
In addition to writing thank you notes, what I'll say is I believe FedEx was the company. They had thank you Thursdays where they had to write a thank you note to a coworker or a vendor or a partner or someone. And it was like thanking them for something they did that impacted their lives. And so I've carried that forward. Every Thursday, I handwrite a note and put it in the mail to somebody. But I'm also carving out time every day on LinkedIn, not just to go in and selfishly post and be like, Tammy's great, look what Tammy's doing, but to go in and look through my network of people. I'm like, oh, I haven't talked to Francesca in a while. Let me look at her page, see what she's doing. Let me engage with some of the content that she's posting. So it's about engaging and staying top of mind for the people in your network, asking thoughtful questions. Just liking a post, that's not enough because that's not memorable. Reading something, asking a question, relating to the post in a meaningful way, that is where investing in your network and making sure your network knows, oh, that's interesting, Tami's take on this. People in this network know that I'm seeing their posts. They also know that if they tag me, I'm going to engage in it. So I do time block every day. A lot of the time is in the morning. So it doesn't interrupt my 9 to 5, but it is important for me to build that network and for the network to know that I'm there to support them as well.
The key word that you mentioned there is invest, right? It's just like keeping up with friends, right? You would text them and you gauge, but that's so often those communities are out there online, right? Yes, you might not join certain groups on LinkedIn, but by engaging on those posts and staying active with people, you really sustain your long-term work relationships and also become very good friends with those folks. But you definitely build that community, right? And your tribe almost that will be there to help you throughout life if you stumble, right? Or for whatever reason, the economy takes a dip and companies let go of folks. You can reach out and be there almost as a support system for one another. It is very beneficial. And I think it gets lost this day and age in social because a lot of people do the bare minimum. It's also just delivering that value first, instead of expecting and taking from people. How can I give to you and help support your world? So I think that's really powerful that you say that. And touching on that, that kind of relates to a few things that we've spoken about already, relate to like mindset, working hard, staying late, overachieving, investing in your network. Do you have any thoughts or perspective on what students or young professionals this day and age should do to maybe perhaps work on their mindset?
I think you have to identify where your fear is, like what's holding you back right now from doing that. Identify that and then find someone in your network, whether it's a mentor, a professor, a family member, and say, I know I need to do this. These are the hurdles that I've identified that are standing in my way. Can you help me walk through this? Because it's the fear of doing something that we haven't done before. And you have to recognize your fears and say, am I the only one that feels this way? Or can you help me work through this? And again, I don't know how many young people have identified a mentor. I think that's critical. It can be a professor. It can be someone who graduated a year ahead of you and has already entered the workforce, right? Who maybe has gone down that path before, but ask the question, because if you don't get it out of your head, you're not going to overcome it on your own.
That's powerful because I do think a lot of people sort of think that they have to go and have a mentor that is way, way, way above them. And that is incorrect, because you could literally have somebody that you talk to that is one position above you, because sometimes you don't always need to know how do I get to that end result, but how do I actually just get to the next step on my journey to where I want to go. And then if we look at your career, what is one thing that you would potentially have done differently at the start of your career if you had a chance?
Well, at the start of my career, social media didn't exist. What I think I would have done is I would have asked other professionals to make and facilitate introductions to me. I don't know that I was great about that. So while I was in college, I worked for a men's minor league basketball team. The league was called the Continental Basketball Association, and I worked for the Grand Rapids Hoops. There was no NBA development league at the time, but the CBA, sometimes NBA teams would have an injured player and they'd call up a player from the CBA. And so a lot of NBA teams would send scouts out to different CBA games. And, I was in charge of credentials, and I would sit at the credential table and hand the passes out to the scouts as they came in. And my maiden name is Tami Scott. And so all the players and everyone called me Scotty. That's what I was known by in the basketball world then. So now fast forward, I graduated college. I'm in Salt Lake City. I've been there a year and a half. The LA Clippers reached out to me and wanted to interview me for a role, a communications role that they had open. And so I flew to LA, interviewed. I'm walking through the hallway of what's now crypto.com arena. I'm walking through like the tunnels back there. I forget who I was interviewing with. And I'm crossing paths. Coach Doc Rivers is walking towards me. And he was a scout for the Milwaukee Bucks when I was with the Grand Rapids Hoops. And I see him, but I'm not going to say anything because I handed him a credential before, like several times. Like I don't expect Doc Rivers to remember me at all. And I'm walking by, he kind of looks at me, nods. I take like 4 steps back and he goes, Scotty? And I'm like, oh my gosh, how does Doc Rivers remember who I am? It was also great in that moment to be like, oh, wow, there's a connection there. I ended up turning down they offered me a role. I ended up turning it down because I was really young and I was like, LA is the city that will eat me up at this age. So I didn't do that. But I really wish I would have leaned into those connections, with Doc Rivers to be like, hey, do you know anybody that's hiring in, I don't know, Detroit or, somewhere else, another city where I would have liked to have lived. Not that Detroit's where I wanted to live, but I wish I would have had the courage or the thinking to really lean into and start building the networks at that young of an age.
A little nerve wracking, a little intense situation. But yeah, I totally understand what you mean. It's like, can I see the long term journey or the benefits that might come out of me sustaining this relationship now instead of, the short term? You mentioned something that sparked a question in my mind around sports and all the offers that you received for various different teams. How important is it for students and young professionals this day and age to choose an industry and maybe stick to it for the rest of their career versus maybe trying to jump from different business verticals throughout their career?
I feel like I'm living proof of like, I stuck to my through line is communications. And I did it in professional sports. I did it in identity theft protection. I've done it in financial technology. I've done communications in education technology and influencer marketing, and now with an online education company. But it's communications, whether that's public relations, media relations, investor relations, crisis communications, internal communications, everything that falls under that communications umbrella. That's the through line that I'm following, and it's taking me across industries, and I continue to learn as I go. And so my husband says to me a lot, he's like, you switch jobs more than anyone I know. And I'm like, but I'm growing and learning. I'm bettering myself. I'm challenging myself. I'm not jumping ship for the sake of jumping ship. Also, I've been working for 25 years. So yes, I've worked for a lot of different companies, and it may take you a few roles in your career to find out your passion. My son is studying business management right now with a emphasis in economics. He's not sure what that job looks like. Does he want to be a financial analyst? Does he want to be an accountant? Does he want to be a controller? He doesn't know. So I'm hoping that through a series of internships, he can figure out what he likes and doesn't like to find that through line and go through there. So if that's, for students and young professionals listening, don't worry if you're like, this isn't the field for me, whether that's accounting or marketing or whatever, you can pivot, and don't be afraid to do that. But you have to find something that you're passionate about. Otherwise, work becomes work, and it feels a lot less like work when you're passionate about it.
You have to be very passionate about it. And I think it's also key that you mentioned you stayed within the same vein, right? You evolved in the communications and relations, even though you swapped to different industries and verticals. It's still more opportunities might potentially come your way when you stay within the same industry, such as sports, right? To your point about walking through and, getting different offers that might come across your plate. That definitely helps because you're spearheaded in one industry. But yeah, I think it's fun almost to test out different industries, right? So that you're not isolated to one, because it does help with versatility and it helps an individual grow over time. So staying in obviously communications, we touched base before this and you mentioned that you're growing up in a different time. Like you were so used to talking on the phone, right? Like literally the phone, not like cell phones, etc., right? Versus texting and all of that. And you mentioned that developed great soft skills through doing that. And in this day and age, is it important for younger generations to learn that today, or do you think that times are changing?
I think it's very important today because a face-to-face conversation, a phone conversation is so much more efficient than 27 back and forth emails. You can get on the phone and in 5 minutes solve a problem instead of 5 days going back and forth over email and misunderstanding what someone's intention was or their tone was. In 5 minutes, we can solve this on the phone and move on to the next thing. So from an efficiency and speed standpoint, the phone is the most productive form of communication.
So spot on. Yes, just even that time essence that you mentioned, it just speeds things along a lot quicker than going back and forth with text or email. And it's almost where you're seeing reading is becoming the new listening, right? Because some people will ask double questions, some people will ask certain things, and a lot of folks will overstep or not answer that question that comes through. So sometimes that's where phone conversations can also help. What skills do you think are crucial for young PR professionals to develop so that they can stay relevant in this rapidly evolving job market?
Young PR professionals need to, I want to phrase this in a way that everyone can understand. I want you to always be curious and I want you to always ask why. And not why in the snarky way, like, why do I have to do this? But in the curious way of like, I'm happy to do this. Can you explain to me why this is important to the bigger picture? How does this ladder up? Because when you feel that connection to the bigger picture and what you're contributing, how it makes the whole so much more richer, or, the growth bigger, drives more revenue, that's so important. And you're like, oh, okay, I see how these 6 tasks that I'm doing, if I don't do this, the company doesn't reach revenue goals, or we don't hit these deadlines. So when I say ask why, I'm saying ask it out of curiosity, not out of annoyance or sarcasm. But when you ask that question, when you say it over the phone in person, people hear your tone. When you ask it in an email, that's harder to understand. But understanding the why is so critical to the success of communications and really any role out there. Knowing how your contribution plays a role.
And it also it benefits them a lot too. They'll start to understand the business lines, the industry itself, and then they will remember those lessons because they asked and spent time actually learning and then implementing, and that will help boost their career as well. And one thing I'm very curious about is you mentioned you played softball and basketball in high school. So did playing sports have an impact on your career journey? And like, if so, how did it? Because it's very interesting. You were involved in sports when you were younger, and then you shifted into a sports industry as well.
Yeah. So I was on the basketball team, the softball team, the volleyball team. On the volleyball team, I broke my hand. On the basketball team, I had to have knee surgery. On the softball team, I broke my ankle 3 times. So I was not good. I was not coordinated, but I was every time the worst player on the team, but I knew the role that I played. And I wasn't a starter, and that was okay. But being part of the team and knowing that I was helping make other people better, that was such a huge lesson for me because, the Caitlin Clark effect, right? She's on a WNBA roster and she's not the highest scoring player on her team right now. Like maybe she's the highest turnovers on her team right now. She went from being the best player to a team where she's not the best, in a league where there's so many, there's Olympians in this league. And so I'm the inverse of Caitlin Clark. I was the player on the bench who didn't get much playing time, but from a practice perspective and cheering everybody on, I knew what that role was like. And so that was so important for me to take into my career, to say, hey, I'm not in the C-suite. I don't have that entrepreneurial spirit in me, but guess what? I want to cheer everybody on and I want everybody to win. And I know what role I play on that team. And I know that goes back to high school sports.
And I feel like that had an impact on where you are today, because the roles are different. Like, sure, okay, when you're growing within your career, to some essence, you have to be a top performer, right? And play the game and achieve and make accomplishments and stuff like that. But then when you're in the position that you're in today, you do need to cheer on people more, because when they are in their more junior positions, they are wanting to climb that ladder and prove themselves. So I think that that's really great that you highlighted that, because there does seem to be a direct connection from sports, and that you knew your role, but you were also there to encourage and support the team along their journey. And that's needed in leadership roles. This question is more related around internships. Some people have a different view and perspective on internships because of their varying different career journeys. But you mentioned you interned with the basketball team, the Grand Rapids Hoops, which then turned into a full-time position. So from your perspective, are internships impactful, and should young college graduates try to seek them out today?
100%. It's the most impactful thing you will do in college to set yourself up for a career. When you're applying for a job, whether it's in sports, whether it's with a bank, it does not matter where you go. The number of applicants that have a college degree that oh, I majored in accounting, or I majored in marketing, I did this. Now they're looking, so if everybody's equal there, who stands out? oh, I had an internship. I did this in my internship. These were the things I did. It's not just, oh, I interned for the Phoenix Suns. What did you do in your internship what did you learn in there? What did you contribute? Are there any data points? Did you help improve season ticket holder fan experience by 62%? Like, how can you set yourself apart? And that internship is what does it. What I'm so grateful for at Grand Canyon University, the students that are pursuing a major in sports and entertainment business, before graduation, before they get their certificate or their degree, they have to complete 300 hours in sports or entertainment. So that could be like volunteering at a golf event. That could be we have Super Bowls here. We have the Final Four here. We have golf tournaments here. Like every major event comes to this town. And then there's athletics on campus. There's spring training here. So it's so easy for these students. I mean, if they were based in like Oklahoma City, it might be a little harder. They don't have all the professional sports franchises there. But here, the opportunities for these students to volunteer or work to get this experience is here. And these students are so set up for success. And I tell the graduating students that are in my classes, I don't care what your GPA is. Don't put that on your resume. I want you to outline the 300 volunteer hours or work hours you did in the industry, because that is what they're looking for. That will set you apart. And so whether your internship in college requires you to do 300 hours or whatever it is, lean into that, because just because you read a textbook in a class, took a test, aced it, that's awesome. How did you apply it? And what did you learn when you applied it?
I think the application is key there. We can spend time learning, but sometimes that's ultimately what holds us back, because then we become overthinkers and we don't go and step into action. And it's just like, I remember back in college, a professor told me everything in life is like a math equation, right? It's not going to solve itself. Like, you have to take action and test, and sometimes you might fail in order to get that result, right? And ultimately you'll work it out, but you've got to step into action to actually solve it.
You said you have to fail, and failure is so important that literally last night I hosted a failure party. I invited 7 professional women, and we talked about our failures, our professional failures, and what we learned from it. And we left at the end of the night talking about how important it is to fail fast, fail forward, because that's where learning is. One of the women that was there, she admitted, I can't think of a failure which tells me I'm not pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. And I was like, wow, that's huge. One of the failures that I shared was based on speed. I was just moving too quickly and I made this huge mistake. So now I slow way down in what I'm doing, and I'm way more thoughtful about it because I don't want to make that mistake again. But telling other people about the mistake helps other people from making the mistake. We live in this curated world of Instagram and TikTok where we want everyone to see all the perfections, or whether it is perfected or we've got a filter on it or whatever it is. It's time to be real too, and to talk about how critical failure is in your personal life, in your professional life. And it's only effective if you really do learn from it.
Yeah, it's you have to fail fast, right? Because to your point, you don't want to do it again, but it's also a very wonderful time in life to learn what not to do, because you're going to learn it potentially at some point. So why not learn it now versus later? So just hurry up and get it done, in a sense, rip that Band-Aid. So one thing I wanted to touch on, and it sparked in my mind because you spoke about thank you notes and how to stand out, right? And that's especially when all throughout your life, but especially with these young college graduates and young professionals in this day and age, should those folks try and have themselves stand out when applying to internships, not just within the corporate world or with people that you meet?
Yes. So when you're applying for an internship, go to the company's LinkedIn page. You can click on the people in the company. You can search by titles. You can type in keywords. You can type in marketing. Just start connecting with all the people who have marketing in their title at the company. See who connects with you. then send them a direct message and be like, hey, Wade, it's so great to be connected with you. I applied for an internship. I'm so excited, about the opportunity, potentially learn from your team. Any insight you have that you'd be willing to share with me, I'd be forever grateful.
So, spot on. I mean, I think it even as an intern or a young college graduate or young professional, people want to give back. So like right then, that is the pivotal moment to just ramp up your LinkedIn connections, because people are willing to help you out because they were once there before, right? Whereas once you kind of climb up the corporate ladder, people are like, I know why you're messaging me. They kind of get the inside scoop, whereas you kind of have favorability there. So, I definitely agree that folks should speak out a little bit more and not be afraid, because at the end of the day, what's that saying? We all put our pants on the same way, right? Whether people have different titles and all of that. So, one other element you touched on was collecting data. I think folks have a misconception from when they're younger because they're not used to it, right? A lot of corporations run businesses backed by data. So, would you mind touching on, are there certain elements or how potentially people could turn their internships, or what certain elements could they pull out and turn into data points? Because sometimes it takes a mental shift to really identify, I'm a restaurant host or whatever the position they're in. There's ways in which that you can massage that messaging in order to present yourself as more skilled than just a host. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So in a lot of internships, they'll assign you a project to work on, or this is your task for the semester that you're here. Ask, what does success look like in this role? Like, define that. Does it look like if I'm working a ticket booth at a Arizona Diamondbacks spring training game, we want customers at the window to select their tickets, pay for their tickets, be provided their tickets. We want that whole experience to be less than 3 minutes. Okay, if that's the goal and you're able to achieve that in 2 minutes and 52 seconds, you beat the goal. But understand, what is the measurable goal that they want you to achieve in the internship? Put a number to it, put some data to it, and then when you're done, assess it. Ask them to help you assess it. What are the tools that we're going to measure this by? Because now you have a data point. And when you go out there to apply for a job and you can demonstrate that you're a data focused person, like you're measuring your performance, instead of saying, I assisted in the ticket booth at Arizona Diamondbacks spring training games. I did that. This was the goal. I drove the results by this much, whatever that is. But ask at the start, what is a measurable goal that we can tie to the success of this position?
Yeah. And I think it's key that, a lot of younger kids start to have that mental shift into that framework, because oftentimes they won't. They'll just go to the job that they're at and they'll just work through it versus actually understanding, how can I put KPIs to this? And at some points, it's a very simple way to do it. You just got to think outside the box. So staying in that same line, you'd mentioned your first job was as a manager of the in-stand food vendors at a mini league baseball stadium. So like, that's very, very interesting. So like, what skills or lessons did you potentially learn there, because it was your first, that would potentially help you all throughout your career or stay with you?
Yes. So the team was the West Michigan Whitecaps, a single A baseball team at the time affiliated with the Oakland A's. The stadium had just opened in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was in high school. I applied through a staffing company. Day one, game one, they had me like working a cash register in a concession stand. Day two, I don't know, week two, the general manager of the team, not even with the staffing company, the general manager came in and he's like, are you Tami Scott? I'm like, yes. Cause I like knew who he was. And he's like, come with me. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? And he's like, people are talking about you. We need someone to manage all the vendors that are walking through the stands and selling cotton candy and popcorn and peanuts and hot dogs and sodas. We didn't have a plan in place. People have been saying great things about you. I need you to manage that group of people. Okay. I think I was 17 years old. No one that I managed was younger than me. I mean, there were like 60-year-olds who were like just working for fun, like as they were approaching retirement, just working some baseball games. Everyone that I managed was older than me, significantly older than me. So what I learned then was continue, I mean, not that I didn't know, but respect your elders. And also when you're managing people, everyone responds to different things. So I learned that, I don't want to say the hard way, but I'm like, I keep saying this and these people aren't responding. Well, that's not their language that they're hearing it in. So I need to say it differently to them. So that was a huge lesson that I learned, was like, I was a teenager and managing people that were like my grandparents' age, um, and it was something that I didn't expect. And I used to be the youngest person in the room, and I'm not sure when that changed, but I'm definitely not the youngest person in the room anymore.
And I think that relates back to you were touching on identifying your fears and acknowledging what those are so you can overcome them. I think you tend to see some younger folks, right, that might be in higher up positions that have to manage older and younger folks, right, just because they have more of the leadership skills, etc. But I think oftentimes there are younger kids that have that fear because they want to excel and they want to climb the corporate ladder very quickly, but sometimes they won't reach out to a role, right? Because, or step into a role because they know that they'll be managing people that are older than them. And that might be a fear. So do you recommend that like people just go for it anyway? Or do you think that they should take time to stay back, wait until that, certain people leave and then step into that role?
It depends on the person. And I know that's not the ideal answer, but if you are confident in your abilities, I don't want to say fully confident, but if you're like, I'm just going to say yes and figure it out, say yes and figure it out, jump in. But what you need to do too, as a good manager, when you're in that position, is you need to ask for feedback. Hey, is the way I'm asking for you to do this, is the way I'm delivering information to you, is that helpful to you? How could I be doing this better? How could I be serving you better as your manager? Don't make the assumptions that you know it all, but constantly be open to feedback, because managers who aren't asking for feedback aren't going to be managers for very long. Because when you think about, oh, this is my way, this is the only way to do it, it's not. You have one view, you don't have the full view. So asking those who report to you for feedback makes you a better manager.
One last question I'd like to ask you and run by you is you spoke about startups earlier, and you're seeing, obviously more and more of them come up in this space, especially with this AI movement and stuff like that. So what are some lessons that people can learn about startups from your experience and being in them?
My first experience with a startup was with LifeLock. I was employed for 30 days and I said to my boss, when do we get paid? Like, what's the pay cycle here? And he goes, oh, we missed last payroll. We didn't have enough funds. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Am I working for free? And he's like, no, it's coming. Like, it's coming in 2 days. And like, we're making up for it. And that was literally the only time in my career that's ever happened to me. Like, they never missed payroll again. But ask those questions when you're entering a startup. When is the last time you missed payroll? How many times have you missed payroll? Those are questions to ask, because if not, you might find yourself in a position being like, am I getting paid? Like, what am I doing here? That's a really important question to ask. What I love about startups is they're generally very scrappy. They're like, okay, we're just going to figure it out. We're going to band-aid it. You know what, Tami, you're in charge of QA testing the website this week. I don't know what that means. Can someone just give me a few pointers of what I'm doing? Great. So now I'm QA testing a website for an educational technology company startup. Cool. Never done that before. I know I absolutely don't want to pursue that in my future, but it was needed and I stepped in and I did it. It's not my strong suit. I'm like, okay, when I find this bug, how do I report it to you? Because the way engineers communicate is very different than the way I have practiced communication. So I love that I get to do so many different things. I love in a startup, more often than not, I can't remember any time I said no to something. I'm like, oh, it needs to be done. I'm all in. Someone teach me how to do it and I'm all in. And I love startup organizations, even if it's like 10 years old and it's still like 25 people executing on this very focused mission. I love that, because you know that there's such a sense of urgency. And if I drop the ball on this, it has ripple effects for days. Like, this is going to stop, the product from launching on September 1 to December 1 if I don't get this done. And you have to work as a team. Like, if you're on a basketball team or a softball team or a volleyball team, and you have to say, hey, I'm anticipating this hurdle. Can someone help me before we get there? And it stops everything. So I love the communication style and the way that teams work together in startups.
It's definitely a totally different mindset and a whole different way of working. And I think it's important to kind of do both, like if you can, because there's different structures, different review processes within large companies that are already stood up versus startups, right? Because you just want to kind of go bare knuckles and just go and get everything done, but you also get massive amounts of experience, but also growth, touching on those KPIs, right, over time. So you touched on, you had your son in 2004 and you made a career shift. For younger women starting out their careers today that might eventually have kids and a family, how did that impact your career, and would there be anything that you would change about it, or any advice that you would give other women in the workforce that might help them when they get to that point in life?
That's a great question. And I address this every semester with the women that are in my class because I say, when I was pregnant with my son, I didn't see anybody else in the WNBA who was pregnant or had young children at home. I just didn't see it. So I didn't know how it worked. So I was like, I don't know how to make it work. There was no one before me who showed me how it could be done. The WNBA just started its 28th season. There's have to be plenty of people out there that have done that can figure it out. Like someone has done it. So asking around saying like, how do I do this? But one thing I do tell young women and young men is that when you start a family, if you're working in professional sports, you're more often than not expected to be at every home game. I worked as the director of media relations. I had to travel to every game. Team played in New York, I was in New York. Team played in Houston, I was in Houston. Now, if you work for in-game entertainment for the Phoenix Suns, you're probably not traveling to the game in Dallas or Sacramento. You're for all your home games. But what you need to understand is you need to ask, okay, when I start a family, how many home games am I allowed to miss? When my child is in elementary school and has a school play or has a T-ball game, how many games am I allowed to miss? Because for me, saying no to anything that my son was doing, that wasn't an option. Like I was mom first and I was going to be the best mom that I could be, and work was going to come second. And when I left the Phoenix Mercury, went to work in city government for 9 months, and then the opportunity to go work at the NASCAR track. The track was in Phoenix. That track wasn't getting up and going anywhere. So I didn't have to travel. The sport came to me, and there were 2 NASCAR event weekends a year. So I knew 2 weekends a year, I was going to be that mom that was MIA. Like I had to be at the track at 3:30 a.m. when the, TV news trucks came to do their live shots, when the news started at 4 a.m. And I knew I was there until the last reporter left after filing their story after a 11 p.m. checkered flag. So I was there until probably 1 in the morning. So I was like getting 2-hour naps every night. But I knew that those were 2 weekends a year that I would have to move other things around because I wasn't going to be present for my family those 2 weekends. But what I tell young people, men and women, is understand what the priority is, how you want to show up for your family, and then find a job that will allow you that. But saying no to your family could take that family away from you potentially, you know?
You're correct. It potentially could, and I think you're starting to see the shift within corporations where I think back in the day it was very work corporate focused and business focused, but now you're starting to see where they're starting to pull in more family time, right? Understanding that people need that time, even when you look at this big, massive shift with like mental health awareness and stuff like that as well, that it's very, very, very important. And it's also very important for younger professionals to understand that it's also about them interviewing the company that they want to work for, right? What are their core values? What are they looking for? And to your question about pay as well, very important question. So as we wrap up here, are there any last words or thoughts that you would like to share with the audience today?
One thing that I wanted to mention, we were talking about, I'm always telling students, shoot your shot. So find that person to connect with on LinkedIn. Maybe they accept it, maybe they don't. Once they accept it, be prepared with what's the real quick direct message you're going to send. They may respond, they may not. And one day I started reflecting, I'm like, do I do that? Who's the last person that I sought out to connect with? And I'm always referencing it's a big global brand, a big US brand that's headquartered here in Phoenix. I'm always referencing them to students of like, when you want to work in sports, you don't have to work for a team, a league, a facility. You could work for a brand. You could work for this brand. They activate in motorsports, they activate in the NBA. You can always work on the brand side of things. I'm always referencing this brand. And so I thought, I'm going to reach out to the CMO. So through LinkedIn, went in, connected with him. He accepted it, sent him a direct message. And I said, hey, I'm always referencing your brand to students. I'm always like, you're the go-to brand that I reference. Would you be open? Because I said, I don't even know if you're based in Phoenix. I said, if you're ever in Phoenix, could I take you to lunch sometime and learn a little bit more about you and share a bit about how I'm referencing your brand? He responded probably within 24 hours. And he said, I never get messages like this. You have my interest. Here's my email. So I'm like, okay. So I emailed him and I said, elaborated a little bit more. And he responded with his assistant on copy. And he said, let's make it happen. And his assistant was like, Jeffrey wants to take you to dinner. Are you free on Thursday? I'm like, I was asking to take him to lunch. Now he wants to take me to dinner. Went to dinner and he's like, I get DM'd all the time. I get cold calls. He's like, you're not asking for anything. I'm like, nope, sure. I'm not asking for anything.
And so many people do. Wow. And you were basically that brand ambassador for them without them even knowing, but to the younger generation, which is monumental, because brands are always trying to advertise to the next generation because they've already got most at a certain age locked into that brand and favorability. So that's very, very great. I appreciate you touching on that.
Yeah. And then we ended the dinner. He said, what can I do to be helpful to you? I'm like, do you want to come speak to my class this fall? And he's like, absolutely. So I didn't roll in with an ask, but when he asked what he could do, I was ready.
That is really, really unique. It's such a fascinating story about shooting your shot, and it's kind of interesting that it ties into your sports background. I feel like we should go into being a WNBA coach now. You know what I mean? Just get out there, ladies, shoot your shot.
Maybe down the road.
You never know. Well, Tami, I just wanted to thank you and say, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today and getting to know you. And I appreciate you sharing your insights and your journey and, struggles and just showing your resilience to this younger generation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share.